Thank you. J'ouvre maintenant.
I call this meeting to order.
Bienvenue à la réunion.
Welcome to meeting number 22 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics.
Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee is considering the main estimates 2022-23, vote 1 under Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying, vote 1 under Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, vote 1 under Office of Senate Ethics Officer, vote 1 and 5 under Offices of the Information and Privacy Commissioners of Canada, referred to the committee on Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. Today's meeting is taking place in the hybrid format, pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members and witnesses are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I think everybody, including our witnesses today, are familiar with the format. Now, before we go to our witness today, I'm going to take a minute, and we have an administrative point that we need to deal with, and that is the budget for the study of the main estimates. So this was distributed to everyone this morning. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the proposed budget? Okay. Do we have any objection to this proposed budget being adopted? Okay, the budget is adopted. Thank you. So now I would like to welcome our witness from the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada, Carolyn Maynard, Information Commissioner. Ms. Maynard, you have up to 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Merci, bonjour.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for inviting me to appear before you today.
I have been looking forward to the opportunity to speak to this committee. J'ai bien hâte de répondre à vos
I am eager to answer your questions about how my office works to uphold the right of access through our investigations and the guidance that we provide to complainants and institutions, as well as our observations regarding the access to information regime.
2021-22 was a record year for the number of complaints submitted to my office. We registered nearly 7,000 complaints between April 1st, 2021 and March 31st, 2022. This represents an increase of 70% over the previous fiscal year. My team remains committed to ensuring that the Access to Information Act is properly applied and that requesters are able to access the information to which they are entitled. However, this steady and ever-increasing stream of the complaints represents a major challenge for my office. In response to this challenge, we have thrown everything we have at these complaints. Our extraordinary efforts to boost our performance have included putting capital expenditures, longer-term projects, and all hiring except for investigators on hold in order to put more resources towards investigations and ultimately closed nearly 6,800 files last year. This is well above the 4,400 files we are expected to close based on our current funding. Even with our improvement in efficiency and our continuous improving results, we are not able to keep pace. Our backlog continues to grow. In concrete terms, this means that Canadians are not getting timely resolution of their complaints for access to information requests related to contracts signed by the government during COVID. Cela signifie que des résidents.
It means that residents in your riding still don't have the information they are seeking on immigration applications for loved ones. It also means that numerous First Nations communities are still denied access to records that would help us move forward with reconciliation.
Challenge is such that we cannot innovate our way out of this situation. We are at risk of not being able to provide even the most basic minimum of service to Canadians. Additional resources for my office will be needed to reduce the number of complaints in our inventory, while at the same time ensuring that new complaints are dealt with in a timely manner. Depuis un certain temps déjà,
For some time, I've been sounding the alarm on issues with the access to information system that have grown worse since the onset of the pandemic. In March of 2020, I stated that a properly functioning access system is critical to ensuring accountability, transparency, and the trust of the public.
Full access to information regime, government institutions have had more than 2 years to adapt to the reality of a pandemic and the challenges it brought to our life and to our work environment. Yet, COVID-19 continues to be used as an excuse for poor performance in the area of access to information. This is not acceptable. Institutions must live up to their legislative obligations. In my meetings with minister and senior leaders, I emphasize that they must make the right of access a priority. Il n'est pas nécessaire d'attendre.
There is no need to wait for legislative change to take action, especially considering that the review of the act that the government was required by law to launch in 2020 has not yet concluded. TBS's report on the review of the access regime was originally planned for the beginning of 2022. Unfortunately, it has not yet been released.
In addition, in spite of clear evidence that institutional capacity to process access to information requests have degraded overall, the recent budget offered very little funding to bolster this capacity. All of this paints a bleak picture of the state of access in 2022. Je me ferai présentement un plaisir.
I will now be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And the first questions will go to Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maynard, and thank you for coming today. I'm going to start with the budget, which you ended with. So your budget this year was cut by over $800,000 from last year's estimates and over $2.1 million from extra expenditures. So you talked about files you processed over 6,800. That's to pay over 4,400. So obviously it's decreased, or we're not getting what we need to take care of the files that you've got. Did you request your budget to be reduced?
My budget did not get reduced, actually. It was increased 2 years ago by $3 million. With respect to closing, and the budget that was given to us was to close 4,400 cases a year. What I was saying is that even though we got an increase in our budget, now that we're getting around 6,500 complaints a year, we're not able to keep up with the pace.
So Ms. Maynard, I'm looking at the main estimates for 2022-23. Estimates to date for this year were $16 million. I'm just to look at program expenditures office information. I'm looking at estimates to be $14.1 million. So that's a difference of $2.1 million.
Oh, I think it's because we were able to carry forward a $1.8 million from a previous year that was not expended. So we were not, our funding has been the same for the last 3 years. Okay,
so the next question is, did you ask for the same funding, or what funding did you request for this year coming up?
For this year, we are now we just started putting the numbers together. We're hoping that to have a submission done by the end of the summer. I think because of the increase by about 2,000 cases a year, plus all the infrastructure that we are not able to put in place because we don't have enough money, we'll be in the ballpark of being $3 million to $5 million extra that we will be asking.
Okay, and do you think that will catch up the backlog plus fulfill all the requests that you'll have coming in?
Well, because we're able now with the people that I have to close around 6,000 cases, I'm hoping that will keep the pace, and then we'll have to increase that to about 2,000 cases a year, because we currently have 4,000 cases in our inventory. This is only going to increase. Just to give you an idea, this month we receive 1,000 cases and new complaints. If this is continuing for the rest of the year, if that's what it's going to be, I'm talking about 12,000 cases for 2022.
So what's the backlog right now? What's the longest we have for someone waiting for a case to be resolved?
When I was appointed in 2018, we had a backlog of 2,400 cases. Some cases dated back to 2010. Now we're luckily out of those 2,400 cases pre-2018, we only have 400 cases left. We're doing really well. Those cases are the complex cases, unfortunately. But we have about 4,000 cases pre-2022. So we have a backlog of 4,000 cases that keeps growing.
And some of those are over 2 years old, correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And if they're complicated, how complicated is it that they take over 2 years? Are there some that are waiting that aren't 2 years but aren't complicated? I mean, why do we have some certainly that are over 2 years old? Maybe you can just let me know one example.
Well, we have examples of cases where the type of documents are secret or top secret. So those are difficult to investigate. We have to have special infrastructure and special delegation to investigate those cases because they're dealing with national security documents. And then we have to also talk to the institution. Some of the analysts that were dealing with these requests have left. So sometimes we have to start from scratch with dealing with the institution and understanding why they redacted their documents. Sometimes it's complex just because they have thousands of pages. We've had just a case recently with Justice that was 22,000 pages. So when you do a line by line, it does take a lot of time.
On the average ATIP that's done, what's a reasonable return from your department, or what would your mandate be if you had everything, all the funding you needed, and that's a complex one, but at an average request, what's the average return you'd get? Or what would you want?
Our goal is to do investigation within 90 days, but we are unable to do that. We do that 90 days investigations on cases for that are out of time. Institutions didn't respond in 30 days for their request or ask for an extension. We're trying to do those in 3 months. For investigations on exemptions and redactions, we can think about 6 months to about a year to do a normal long investigation.
Okay, and so what's the average right now? I don't know if you mentioned that. What is the average length of time right now for someone submitting for information to get that back?
For the institutions to get to respond to requests is they have an obligation under the law to respond in 30 days. I think only 62% of requests are meeting those timelines. And that's why I think we are getting more and more complaints to my office because timelines are not being respected in 45 to 60, 50% of the cases.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And next, Ms. Hefner for up to 6 minutes.
Thanks very much. And thank you for being here today, Ms. Maynard, to answer our questions. You mentioned in your opening statement that COVID-19 has become an excuse for poor performance, which is not acceptable, and I agree. But I'm wondering if you can help us understand a little bit about the impact of the pandemic on the entire system. Did we see more FOI requests during that period? And what were the impacts on the people trying to respond to those requests? Why are we seeing thousands more cases that you have to respond to?
So yeah, thank you for the question. The first year of the pandemic, we saw a decrease in number of requests. I think Canadians had other issue to deal with, so they were. I think it was understandable that people were more worried about their health and security than access requests. But in the last year, we've seen an increase in access requests. The problem is the government employees were not allowed to go back to their institutions to work on files. Often ATIP units were asked to not connect on the server until late at night or during weekends so that the network was not being overwhelmed with people working. So at the beginning, the first 6 months, it was a very big, it was very difficult and a challenge for analysts and units to respond to access requests because they didn't have the infrastructure or they didn't have access to paper copies of documents that were requested, or they simply were not getting responded by the OPIs, like the Office of Primary Interest, like other people working in the institutions. Often the last thing they want to do is respond to an access request. They have their program that they're dealing with and the operations. So that's definitely something that these analysts were dealing with. Now, after 2 years, we're saying there's no more excuses. People are allowed to go back to the office. You have, we have people coming to my office, and we respect the restrictions and the health limitations, but we have to be able to do our work. And the legislation under the Act, there is no way to stop responding to access requests. This is an obligation under the Act, and institutions have a responsibility to find ways to do it. There's some department that used this opportunity to innovate and to put in place technology so that they were able to respond and still work from home. Other departments are a little longer in terms of taking this opportunity and these chances to improve their system.
That is a perfect segue to my next question. I remember when I was a journalist at the Hamilton Spectator, we almost had a mandate to file FOI requests and to look for things to file FOI requests. And it was really burdensome. Like there was a lot of documentation. You had to file it away, send it away. It would, and it would come back with packages, like thick packages full of documents. How has that changed over the past 20 years? Are we more digital now? And is there more we can do to digitize the system to make it more accessible and more transparent and easier for people to get the information that they deserve?
Well, it's actually a double whammy, and we are more digitalized now. Government is working electronically, and working from home has helped create documents electronically instead of having documents on paper. So for that, we are better. And I think we're also using emails to respond to access requests. They're using e-posts. On the other side, the fact that we're now creating documents electronically and we're dealing with people by emails and text, it has created a monster of information. So sometimes I give the example of an email exchange that 4 people have kept in their inbox. If you have an access request, normally what we say is that the main receiver of the exchange should keep the emails. The other ones should not have duplicates. But most people, like I'm sure you are and I am as guilty as well, we don't erase emails, or we don't fold, we don't file those documents properly. So you end up with duplicates and numbers of pages. So we are now dealing with access requests that maybe you would normally get 10 pages, and now you're getting 500 pages in response to your access. So it has created a different challenge, and the information management is definitely a big issue within the government, and not just our government. Most institutions have that problem. We're trying to give leaders, encourage leaders to provide their employees with tools so that they can erase, manage, clean, and then only keep the corporate documents that are important, but we don't see that. So the requests are becoming bigger and bigger.
I understand I only have about less than a minute, but your employees are able to work remotely. What's been the impact of that? Has it been overall positive, negative? Could maybe just reflect on that for a bit.
It's been very positive for my office. I was very pleased. I was surprised, actually. We started working from home right away in 2020. Every file we have here has been digitalized, and we closed 6,800 cases last year. That's a record. We've never done more than 6,000 in 1 year. I think the fact that we're working from home and we're giving the tools to our employees to do that has been very helpful. The only files we have to do at the office are the secret files and the top secret files. So we have employees coming in for those.
Okay, that's thank you. And now, Monsieur Villemeux, pour 6 minutes.
Monsieur Villemeux, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the Commissioner for being with us this morning. I would like to start with a question on a letter that you sent to Minister Duclos on observations after meeting with different departments. One of those points was the importance of having a program for declassification. I'll give you a bit of context. I analyzed the matter of declassification of documents, and I noticed that documents are often over-redacted. You mentioned it earlier. And in the Foreign Affairs magazine, it was mentioned that in the United States, 4 million people and 50 million documents were redacted, and it cost millions. And it was found that most of those secrets were not even that important, and the documents were redacted to reduce accountability. What do you think about this? Answer. Your question focuses on two elements. So classifying documents is classifying them as secret or top secret. We see documents that should not have been classified as secret or top secret. And so when people see a document that is secret or top secret, often, as you say, they will redact the document because they're afraid of leaking secret information. So if the classification had been better done, well, information could be shared more quickly. But we're also talking about documents that are 50, 60 years old that are still classified as secret, top secret. And we would like to have a program in which the government would focus on those documents to see whether or not they still need to be secret. Are they still sensitive documents in 2022, or can they be declassified and give people the possibility to have access to those documents more quickly? So a declassification because the documents have become obsolete. Yes. And we could examine the issue of overclassifying out of fear. Answer, it's a matter of training, but yes, there should be a better system. As you say, secrets are good to keep, but not everything is secret. And you said that the mission of your commission is to increase accountability. How do you manage that? You mentioned some agencies that are less collaborative than others, but overall, from the federal administration, do you find that people are trying to slow you down, or are your relationships fairly good? Answer, we have a good relationship with most institutions. The difficulty is that people keep asking for access to information. More and more decisions will be questioned. And so if we want to decrease pressure that the access of information puts on the government, because it costs a lot of money. It costs money for me to investigate, but it costs the government to manage as well. So the government needs to give information more voluntarily, proactive sharing of information in both official languages on their websites. People shouldn't have to ask to have access to information when it's information that they should have access to. Canadians will have increased trust in the government if they have proactive access to documents instead of having to search and make requests. We often hear that it's secret and the government doesn't want to give out the information, whereas that's not necessarily the case. We want institutions to ask themselves what information Canadians should have access to proactively, so that they don't have to wait for an access to information request. Could this be a legislative change? Forcing entities to declassify information or to clean up their obsolete documents to help you? Answer. There is a part 2 on access that forces departments and ministers' offices to give information on spending, for example. That's a good start. But I'm talking about information, like in the United States, after 3 access to information requests on the same topic, well, the information is automatically made public. So this is something that the government could examine or legislate on, or do it voluntarily. But that's not the case. I have less than a minute left, so I have a quick question. Does the RCMP work with you on access to information requests? Or do they cooperate? Answer is yes, but they do have a significant backlog. We are working with them, but we did close 50 complaints with them fairly quickly. So I think that they're taking their situation seriously. And what's the longest time it's taken for them to answer a request? Answer, I'm not sure. I'd have to come back to you on that. There are 300 complaints, and I'm sure that there are at least a few that are 5 or 6 years old. If you could send that information in writing, that would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Green for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you. And I'll follow up on that question in a bit of a rather rapid-fire way. I reference Mr. Michael Dagg, who has a request in to the RCMP and was told that he'd have an 80-year turnaround on that. And so I'm wondering if you would care to comment about the efficacy of a program that's supposed to be around open government when people who are looking for sensitive information have to wait 80 years for any kind of substantive information.
Yeah, so the specific case that you're referring to is actually a file from the RCMP that would transfer to Library and Archive. And Library Archive is the one that had requested an 80-year extension to respond to the request. And Library and Archive are in a very specific and difficult situation where they are in control. They have the documents with them, but it's often documents that were created by another institution. So what they do is they consult with the institution where the information comes from. That
just for reference, this was on Project Anecdote, and yes. While we have the RCMP up, there's another history. You referenced American examples, and I'll bring to your attention the work on COINTELPRO in the 70s and what has been called administrative sabotage. In fact, Paul Marston, the former military archivist for the Library and Archives of Canada, said that something unique is slowly strangling Canadian history, and we should call it out in these processes. So could you perhaps comment and expand on why transparency on these types of sensitive archival records? And I think with this particular file, it references the sensitivity around FOIs of CSIS and the RCMP with specificity around the RG 146 vault. So can you just perhaps talk about the need for the automatic declassification of information for the public interest?
This is exactly what we were talking about earlier. We need in Canada a program where these older files, which are secret, top secret, or sensitive information, but our history with respect to some very specific national security documents that existed 50, 60 years ago that are still classified as secret and top secret. And if we don't have a program where a committee or a group or somebody looks at them after a certain number of years and declassify them to make them available, we'll continue to have access requests denied, like Mr. Dagg received an 80-year extension. In the United States, they have a program right now on declassification after 25 years, I believe, 20 or 25 years, where there's an actual automatic program where documents such as the anecdote file are being reviewed and declassified, and then accessibility to those documents is a lot easier.
Thank you, and I want to say I really do appreciate the candor. What I heard in your statements, what I'm reading in your letter to the Treasury Board with the candor in which you present it is sobering. In fact, I would call it, the canary in the coal mine. It's an indictment, and in your recommendations, you have recommendations 7 and 8 that provide specificity around cabinet confidences. I'll share with you as a member of Parliament, somebody who believes that we have parliamentary privileges to be able to get to the bottom of our work and to have access to these documents. It's been my experience that the government, particularly this one, I would say, has propensity to make everything of cabinet confidence, everything of national security, and therefore nothing accessible. So in your letter, you referenced that you had discussions with 12 of the 16 ministers, and you talked about the need to set an example. I would agree that attitude reflects leadership. So from that, how many of them have responded back to you with a subsequent plan for the development of a declassification program?
Well, right now I'm aware that the Public Safety Department is doing a pilot project on some specific documents where they have a committee looking at declassification. I've heard that TBS is looking at putting in place such a program, but there's nothing concrete so far. Like I'm hearing anecdote and it's hearsay pretty much. But the Public Safety
16 so far
has one.
Just for the record, you'll confirm that it's 2 out of the 16 who have at least said they're initiating some type of project in this regard, 2 out of 16?
No, actually, the departments are not. I think what we need is a program overall for the federal government. So I think if each department starts their own, it's not going to accomplish much. I think they have to get together, and most of the institutions don't deal with those type of documents. But we have library and archives, we have global affairs, PCO, D&D, RCMP. Public service.
With my time remaining and the Hansard being short, may I ask you, in your list of recommendations, do you feel that you have adequately captured the direction and recommendations from this committee to ensure that leaving this study, we would have the basis for the recommendations to ensure that there is a government-wide declassification program, or is that something you'd like to add in addition?
I think I would like to refer you to my special report that I tabled last week or 2 weeks ago for Library and Archive on a systemic investigation, where we dealt with, we made recommendations with respect to declassification. And we also have a report that was done a couple years ago on that specific topic that is accessible. And I can send you the link after my appearance if you would like.
Mr. Chair, just as not a point of administration, if we could just request that those documents be submitted in writing so that they could be for the consideration of our analysts for final recommendations. Thank you.
Your request is noted, and now, right. If I may continue, order, we'll go to Mr. Kirk now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for coming to this committee. I'm a firm believer that one of the hallmarks of a well-functioning democracy is a effective, efficient, and trustworthy access to information regime. Is that something that you would agree with?
Totally, yes.
So as I've since being elected in 2019, my office has filed a little over 300 ATIPs. There's still about 50 or 60 that are outstanding, but my question is very much related to, and I'll read from the letter that you had shared with Minister Duclos when he was Minister of a different portfolio, but as you are, quote, as you are aware, the pandemic did not suspend the right of access. If anything, it increased the need for government transparency, an effort that calls for the collective leadership of all members of Cabinet. Commissioner, have you seen that leadership over the course of the pandemic?
The leadership of providing sense. We have not been able to see real actions. I know there's some action being put together by TBS, but we're still waiting for a report with respect to the review of the system, with respect to the legislative review. Each individual departments, some departments are doing really well. Like I would say Canada Revenue Agency, in terms of they've put in place a lot of innovation to be able to respond to access requests that were increasing in numbers because of CERB and all the benefits that they put in place. Yeah. But as a whole, it's very difficult to pinpoint to actions.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Library and Archives shows, according to the information that's provided, that 80% of requests did not comply with the timelines in the Act. There's other departments as well, the RCMP, the CRA, and others, and I know you had written to 16. What is the solution? Does there have to be further penalties? Is it resources? What are your, if you could sum up in 30 seconds maybe, because I know time is short, what is the solution?
A culture of openness, moving away from secrets, like we talked about earlier. More resources will be needed, but better management of information. And there's a lot of different factors that needs to be considered. And it's not just one thing, but definitely I think leaders needs to give directions that they want to be open and transparent, and then march their words.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I would note that this was an issue that certainly came up in the 2015 election, and the government seemed to claim victory. But certainly, from what you've described today, that's certainly not a victory that anybody should be proud of. Madam Commissioner, through you, Mr. Chair, have you ever noted political interference in any access to information requests?
We have not had any complaints with respect to that type of interference. I understand Madame Legault, the previous former commissioner before me, had an investigation with respect to that. And there's a report on our website with respect to that type of interference, but that was previous to me.
Okay, thank you. Has there ever been a note of access to information officers being chastised, disciplined, released because of performance that may have been related to the information that they have released through access to information requests?
I wouldn't be able to tell you if I'm not aware of anything. If we see in our investigation that somebody has been trying to interfere or intervene, and that it could be also intentional, I cannot investigate those type of actions, but I can refer them to Minister Lemaitre, who can investigate criminal action. I know we referred to 6 of those, and I don't think there's ever been an investigation by the RCMP or by this government with respect to those.
So just to clarify in the short time that I have left, you've referred 6 cases like that to the Minister of Justice, but there's never been any investigations?
As far as we're aware, 6 referral by me and previous former commissioners, which never led to charges.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. And now Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you to the Commissioner for coming in today and for her openness to answer questions. I'll start by perhaps asking, I know Mr. Green had made the assertion that he feels that everything is in cabinet confidence. So perhaps, Commissioner, I'll start by asking if you feel or if there's evidence to prove that that there's any substance to what Mr. Green has said, that everything seems to be in cabinet confidence.
Well, I'm only aware of the cases that are referred to me through complaints, and we are receiving files where there is some cabinet confidence information that's been redacted. Unfortunately, I am not able, I don't have the authority to look at those documents, so I have to rely on the words of our institutions when they say that the documents are cabinet confidence. It is not the majority of our documents. We have just a small amount of cases that deals with cabinet confidence, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if that's something that is being used by the institutions.
So out of the 6,000 some cases that you've received over the past couple of years, how much of that deals with cabinet confidence?
I would not be able to tell you right like that. I don't think it's more than 5% of our cases that has cabinet confidence. Often what happens is requesters, they know they're not entitled to those documents, so they often will remove that from the scope of their requests. They will say, I want everything but cabinet confidence. So we often deal with complaints that are dealing with personal information or advice and recommendation. Rarely, like when there's cabinet confidence, like I said, we're not entitled to see them, so it's difficult for us to acknowledge if they are real cabinet confidence or not.
Thanks for that. And my friend and colleague, Mr. Keurig, said that since 2019, since he's been elected, he has ATIP'd about 300 times. So perhaps I'll ask you the question, out of the 6,000 that you've received over the past year or a couple of years, how much are vexatious claims kind of, or just, fishing expeditions part of the claims that you deal with?
Good question.
We don't look at what the intentions of the requesters are. We are asked to review that, make sure that the request has been responded in time or that the reductions are appropriate. We do have now a section on the Act that institutions can try to refuse to respond to a vexatious or a request that's made in bad faith, but they have to ask my permission to do so. So in the last 2 years, we've received maybe a dozen of those requests, and we only said yes to 1 or 2.
Thanks for that. So, I mean, with ATIPs and that freedom of information is a huge part of building trust in public and institutions and governance. So, I mean, over the past, well, since 2015, our government's invested about $50 million in expanding that transparency within our government. Do you think that this is something that we should be expanding on? Are we kind of headed in that right direction? Is there any advice that you would give to us as to how to continue to build that public trust?
Well, I totally agree that we need to increase resources within institutions. They need more analysts that are trained. They need human resources, but also technology to respond to the increase in demand. So there's definitely some investment that needs to be done. Like I said earlier, there's all kinds of factors that is impacting the system as a whole. My submissions to Treasury Board is dealing with both the legislation recommendations and also how we can improve the system. I encourage you to read the submission. I can send you, I will send the document if you want in writing, but there's resources is one, but the direction from our leaders that transparency and openness and proactive disclosure is definitely the way to go.
Thanks very much for that. And out of the ATIPs, the FOIs that you receive, do you keep track of which department those FOIs are going to or requesting information from? And do you have that information accessible for us?
So we only track the number of complaints that we're receiving. TBS is the administrator of the Act per se, so they receive the annual report from each institution, so they know which institution is getting what kind of number of requests. But based on my statistics, I can tell you that Immigration Canada is top of the number of complaints that we receive, but they also receive over 120,000 requests a year. And we got about 4,000 cases right now with respect to RRCC. CBA, Canadian Border and Service Agency, is a second institution which we receive the most complaints. Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, is third. CRA is fourth. PCO is fifth. So we keep track of the institutions which respected the number of complaints we get, but not the number of requests they receive.
Thanks for that. And lastly, I'll ask you, I know we've had a conversation in this committee today about classified information, about top secret information. Do you think that there is, I mean, obviously when we redact information, it's to protect national security, to ensure public safety. Where is that balance in your mind of providing access to information to the public while also maintaining the security of Canada?
Well, I think the Act actually provides a good test where it has to be you have to prove the harm by providing the information. Is there going to be some kind of harm to our relationship with other countries, or with respect to the information itself? And as the time goes, sometimes the sensitivity of that information diminish, and that's why we're talking about a program of declassification. Sometimes as you create the document, the information is very sensitive, but if it was created 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 50 years ago, that sensitivity has gone. We can tell you that we have seen documents that have been published by other countries and that Canada is still not releasing. And we often question that, like, it's already public through a different country. Why is this not something that Canada is willing to release?
Thank you, Commissioner. I lost track of the clock there and allowed that round of questions to go significantly over time. So my apologies to other committee members to that. All right. So with that, we go next to Monsieur Villemure.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Commissioner, could you send us in writing the last point that you mentioned on information available in other countries that are classified here? If you could do that, that would be great. My question, however, thank you. Pardon me. So for an access to information, if the request is refused, there is a process to examine the refusal. If it's refused again, is there a procedure, an appeal procedure that is outside of the commission, or is everything at play inside the commission? Answer: if a complaint is sent, we are the first level of revision at the federal government. If you're not satisfied with your report that you receive, then you can go to the federal court. So that is the path to follow. Okay. So for an individual, a typical Canadian, is it easy to get to the federal court? As a lawyer, I can say no, I don't think it would be very easy for someone to do so without a lawyer. That's what I heard actually from somebody in my writing. Earlier, you talked about a lack of leadership or the necessity of having more leadership. Could you describe what kind of leadership you would like to see? Answer: so there is an access unit that is working hard to convince the government or departments to give information, because they're applying the law and trying to disclose information. There are some who are more reticent, and so we want ministers and deputy ministers and ADMs to delegate their authority to disclose information. We could perhaps, when we're writing a briefing note, for example, I've seen a deputy minister say, I circle what's public and what can be disclosed so that a revision process isn't necessary. And then people can use their own authority to disclose information. But often we see the opposite. We'll see a document and see what can't I disclose instead of what can I disclose. So we want institutional heads to encourage transparency, and we want the message to be clear so that people aren't afraid of disclosing information. That could be a part of our recommendations, for example. Answer: yes. I will take my last 15 seconds on my next round.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thank you. I do want to note that we are just here on the estimates, so I appreciate that we've turned this into the Grand Inquisition. So I'll try to go back to that frame. This past January, your office has concluded a systemic investigation into the Library and Archives Canada delayed responses to access requests. You found that almost 80% of the requests completed by the Library Archives did not comply with the timeframes as set out in the Act. Your report provided several recommendations to the Minister of Heritage. However, in your evaluation of the Minister's response, you said, and I quote, "The Minister's response fails to address or identify strategies to tackle the accumulated backlog. Rather, the response prioritizes requests categorized as urgent or those related to class action lawsuits first." The Minister's response does not convince me that he has an understanding of the critical situation of the Library Archives, and I continue to urge the Minister to ensure that the backlog is dealt with in the most efficient way. So you talk about developing streamlined work processes, innovative approaches, setting timelines and goals, and one that would be expected to be considered and implemented by LAC and the Minister. That's quite a statement, and I think indicative of the overall malaise. Can you further elaborate on these concerns and whether anything has occurred to change your opinion?
Well, that was very recently that I tabled that report. I understand that there's a plan of action that's being prepared, and that's going to be shared with with us and with the public within the next 6 months. I understand that they're working on obtaining more resources, human resources as well as financial resources, which they definitely need. Whether or not we'll see a change, so far we haven't, because we continue to receive complaints and they continue to have, to put in place all of these actions. But I'm hopeful that they heard. I think they heard me. Hard and clear.
So we've heard some perhaps try to deflect or diminish the way in which cabinet confidence has an impact on transparency and accountability. Given the fact that you have 2 recommendations to this regard, can you perhaps elaborate on why you decided to put those in?
Well, we're one of the only country in the Commonwealth that does not have a agency independent of the government that can review cabinet confidence documents. And while, like I said earlier, requesters are now they understand that they are not entitled to those documents, and it's really difficult for me to tell them if the document that are redacted are cabinet confidence or not. So often they will scoop that out of the complaint. I have seen in a case where the cabinet confidence was imposed on documents that there were not, and by mistake. And we see that also with legal opinions sometimes. They use legal opinion, the exemption 23 on documents that are discussions between lawyers or policy advice. That's not legal advice. So I always thought that having at least somebody independent of the government to review those documents so that you can tell the requester, trust me, it is cabinet confidence, would increase the trust of Canadians in our government. There's nothing worse than being told that you cannot review them.
We also went significantly over on that round, but actually not quite as badly as the other one. So, and that was an important answer. I will now, next is Mr. Bazan, followed by...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Commissioner Maynard for joining us today and for her testimony. Just want to back up a bit. You're saying that there's been 6 cases that you have referred to the Attorney General. Over what time frame were these 6 cases referred? And what were some of the circumstances why you would, why the departments refused to answer and why you need to get that type of legal opinion?
I cannot get into the specifics of the complaints or the investigations per se, but when we see that there's been actions that could be interpreted as, intentionally trying to hide or erase or, take away from somebody's access, I cannot investigate whether or not it was intentional or criminally. And so I refer to the Attorney General. I think I've referred 2 or 3 during my terms, and there's been a few before me.
Do you know if they are being investigated, Commissioner, or they just went into the file 13?
We're not being informed, or there's no follow-up with my office if it has been.
So by legislation, you have to refer to the Attorney General, not to the Public Prosecutor's Office?
No, to the Attorney General.
Attorney General. Then they would have that option of handing it over to the Public Prosecuting Service of Canada. So in your opinion, which department right now is performing the best in meeting access to information requests?
I probably don't have any complaints against them, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. We know which one are not doing so well, but at the same time, having
let's do it on the reverse then. What are the worst offenders? If you can give us departments and how long they're taking to fill requests and how many complaints are against them because they have refused.
In my annual report every year, we list the top 10 or top 20 institutions. Most of the time, it's the same: RCC, CBSA, RCMP, CRA, PCO, Library and Archive. The number of complaints are usually at the highest. Whether or not they are well-founded is a different subject, but I can tell you the RCC is definitely having a really hard time responding to 120,000 access requests from clients who are trying to figure out the status of their immigration files or refugee file. And that was also what led me to do an investigation last year, a systemic investigation, and I did a special report on IRCC, came up with a number of recommendations, but basically increasing the number of information that they provide to their clients will definitely diminish the number of access requests and complaints as a result.
So has those departments and the government in general, invested heavily enough in having enough information officers to meet these levels of requests that they're receiving?
Well, IRCC, I know, is really investing in their technology to provide more information and changing the system, like the portal that they have on their site. But it's going to be, I think the plan of action is up on 3-year term because of the amount of work that needs to be done. So we still haven't seen any tangible results from those changes. The RCMP is also having a very strict plan to try to respond to access requests, but often it's almost overwhelming. Like for me, like even I've got 4,000 complaints in my backlog, and it's when you close one, you've received 3. What do you do? It's really difficult. So that's why our government has to do something else. We have to look at ways to provide information outside of the access requests. The system is overwhelmed.
So you mentioned that a number of departments have been able to adapt to the pandemic and adapt by using technology. Why wasn't best practices used across all departments when you've looked at who's performed well during difficult times and who's used it as an excuse?
Well, I know TBS is using the best practices and they're sharing with all the institutions, but like anything else, we're pretty much on our own. Even my office, when we have our own access unit, because I'm subjected to the act as well. And at one point, it's really difficult to work with other institutions and to share. So we're trying to do that too. We try when I do meetings with ATIP units, I tell them, go talk to CRA. They have e-post now to provide requests. Maybe you want to join that. Or, you can look at artificial intelligence to do research. And we're giving them best practices, but it's really up to the manager and the minister and the department to put those things in place.
It's down to leadership or the lack thereof.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Bazan. And now we go to Mr. Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witness for joining us today. iPolitics reported that well-known ETHI expert Dan Beebe, quote, is strongly in favor of updating the ATIP system, notably by the tender to replace paper-based or manual processes with a more digitized system. Are you in favor of this work?
Yes, totally. I understand that TBS is now putting in place a system where it's going to be online requests and online responses, which we are part as it's like a pilot project. So I think that's going to help for sure, as long as institutions join the pilot project, and hopefully that's going to increase to other type of innovation.
Okay, and before the government reformed the law, many requests were for information that is now proactively published. I think you mentioned earlier something around that. Do you think proactive publication reduced the number of access to information requests since Canadians could get more online? And on the flip side, do you think it increased the average complexity of requests since such simple requests aren't being filed anymore?
I would say that the part 2 of the act that provides proactive disclosure, like mandatory legislative proactive disclosure, it used to be a policy and it was followed by all the minister's office. So it didn't really change anything. This information was usually proactively provided without having the legislation putting in the legislation. It hasn't, in our experience, reduced the number of requests because that's not really what Canadians are after. I think a lot of Canadians are asking for information right now about expenses, about COVID, about vaccine. That's not information that is on the list of proactive disclosure.
Okay, and next question is around power to order institutions to disclose information. So since 2019, your office has had the power to order institutions to disclose information. How often have you used this power, and has it helped to improve the transparency?
It has really helped. We have used it over 40 times. What helps is to tell the institutions that we are about to order disclosures. So sometimes that really helps discussions and compliance with the Act without having to recourse to issue an order. The other thing that really helped too is the authority to publish our reports. I have never had the authority to publish the results of our investigations prior to 2019. So we are lacking 35 years of precedence from our office that we were not able to publish until an annual report, like summaries in the annual report. Now we can publish the full reports. They are accessible on our website. We have a database. It doesn't have to be an order. It could be a recommendation. It really, really helps because we can refer institutions to those reports and say, see, your case is exactly like that, or we can refer complainants to those cases, and it really helps resolve cases informally.
And just finally, can you explain the challenge of declassification and what the government is doing about it?
Well, the challenge is it's that we don't have right now a declassification program. So those cases we were talking about earlier, that sometimes historical national security documents are still classified as secret or top secret, and that the process of going through an access request when those documents are so are considered sensitive is even harder for the analyst, and it's harder for our investigator. Then we have to demonstrate that the information is public or is already out there, or that the sensitivity is not there anymore. So it doesn't mean because it's classified, it cannot be disclosed. It just adds that level of complexity.
And if there's time, the budget has increased by 2/3 since 2015. Your budget. What has this increase allowed you to do?
It allowed me to finally hire about 25 new investigators full-time instead of having consultants and letting them go at the end of the year. So we have now retention plans, and we have development plans. So we have a bigger group of investigators dealing with our cases.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And now, Monsieur Vermeulen, pour
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you again to the Commissioner for her very clear answers. I only have 2.5 minutes, so we'll have to be brief. I would like to know if your office, in its mission, has a mission for education for departments and for the Canadian population. Are we educating people in departments on what privileged information is, what secret information is? Do you do this kind of education? Answer, yes, I do not have the express authority, like the Privacy Commissioner has a mandate for education, but I do it anyway because I find it important. It's one of the reasons why we asked to be able to publish our reports. We have guidelines and directives on our website, and it's very helpful to people, and they are able to see that we are consistent, and they can also see the process that we follow, and they can understand the investigative process. So departments and people are aware of the forms of education and awareness building that you're doing. Yes. So how would you define what should be considered secret? Answer. There are different reasons for something being secret. There are good reasons for national security, and there are good reasons, and our government will make decisions without feeling obligated to be careful with what they're saying and the decisions made, but it should be limited, as we said earlier, to documents or topics that are quite sensitive. Thank you. And in closing, the investigation on IRCC, you mentioned that, and the delays with the Commission are creating delays in the immigration system, and I'm not blaming you. Answer. No, our complaints and IRCC's complaints, usually it takes 30 days for us, and they can't do it in 30 days, but they do it in about 60 days. So usually if somebody complains to us, by the time that we finish the process, they've received an answer. They're files that we close fairly quickly for IRCC. Very well, thank you.
Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I can't help but notice in your program expenditures, your main estimates of 2021 were about 14.9, and yet in this estimates that we have before us for 2022, 2023, they're 14.1 million, there and abouts. So I'm just wondering, we've talked about increases, but we're showing a decrease here of around $815,000. And I've also noted that in your departmental plan, you talk about the increase of complaints, and yet you don't seem to have plans to increase your human resources over the next 3 years. So how do you reconcile those two things?
Yeah, our funding was based on closing 4,000 cases approximately per year. Like I say, our complaints are now almost double that. So what we did is invest in our people and invest in training and invest in templates and in process. But like I said in my opening remarks, innovating is now at its limit. We did everything we could. We've provided all the tools that we could, and now we need more people. And we need less complaints.
Just so that I'm clear, well, I don't know that we're going to get less complaints unless we change legislation and improve transparency on the government side. But am I reading this correctly that you're actually asking for $815,000 yet less in the 2022-2023 estimates than you did in 2021?
I think the 800 was a relapse again from a previous year that we didn't use. So we asked the government to give it back to us so we could spend it last year. Now we're going to be looking at asking for more money to increase our resources and our IT infrastructure.
And those would come in the supplementaries?
In the next 6 months.
Do we get a taste for what that might look like?
You mean how much money I want?
Sure. I was on public accounts previously.
We don't know. We're just starting to look.
Very
at
clearly,
numbers,
the question is,
it's going to be over $3 million.
Yeah. What do you need to get the job done? Is essentially the question I'm asking.
Well, when you look at, we got $3 million to hire 25 people. I will need at least another 25, so minimum 3 million. But that doesn't pay for my corporate services that has to support these people, the translation bureau that we need to publish more reports and publish more guidelines. So all of this has to be really well calculated this time so that the impact of increasing my office is also not felt on the other sectors.
Thank you for your leadership and your candor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go back to Mr. Bazan, I'm going to exercise my prerogative as chair. I've got a few questions, and I was on this committee. This is the first time, Commissioner, that I've had the opportunity to question you as commissioner. But I did question your predecessor early in the 42nd Parliament, and what I found striking about your opening statement was just how little the issues seem to have changed over the past several years. And I think this goes to issues that span successive governments, the issues that were alive and presented to the committee by your predecessor came from the time before, but here we are, and you said that you have been sounding the alarm bells, that there is collapse of the system, sort of, or overwhelming of the system. This is exactly what Commissioner Legault complained about in 2016. There was much talk in the investigation. We did an investigation of the whole system in that committee. And witness after witness after witness talked about an overall pervasive culture of secrecy that has existed for decades. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so we are seeing similar issues. It hasn't got better. I think some departments are definitely better, but we're overall, Madame Legault said it, and we're saying it again. Canadians are asking more and more from their government. The increase in the request has increased by 225% in the last 6 years. The resources to support that system has not gone up to support it.
What will it take to have for government to actually live up to the promise of openness by default? Because the experience of witnesses that we heard in those studies, and it appears not much has changed, is to deny, and that's seems to be the first reaction is what. Which grounds can we use to deny this ATI, or how long can we drag out this ATI? I mean, these are things that haven't changed, it would seem, for a very long time. I'm sure I could look back into testimony at this committee 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and find some of the same issues. What is it going to take to actually change the culture of government to actually buy into the concept of openness by default?
Well, as you know, culture is a very long thing to change. We definitely need more serious leaders with directions to their people, to the public servants, to disclose by default, like you say. We need a more robust legislation. We need to reduce the impact of some sections. Some of the exemptions, like Section 21, advice and recommendations, is overly used and abused throughout the government, because anything is an advice and anything is a recommendation, but really the fact findings, there's so many things that we can release on those documents that Section 21 is being used. And that's one of the recommendation I made in my submission to TBS. Like, Section 21 definitely needs to be limited to very specific cases, so that the institution does not have the discretion anymore. They have to apply the act as it is. There's ways to make the act more specific, less easy to interpret. It's supposed to be more specific, and we also need to encourage discretion. The use of discretion for example, legal opinions is really rarely used. Even if the legal opinion was written 60 years ago, so sometimes I'm questioning, is it really important still to protect that document at this time? But it's very difficult for me to say to a minister, your use of discretion is not reasonable. So it's, we have to look at the facts, we have to look at public interests. That's another thing that the Act doesn't really provide, are the information that we are hiding, should it be released because there's a public interest element to it?
Okay, thank you. And I've gone way longer than I had intended, but I had a specific question too that just really quickly. I mean, your predecessor had actually described C-58 in quite a remarkable meeting that took place at this committee, suggested that it was a step backward, not forward. Do you agree with her?
Well, at the time, I did agree that it was not enough, but we did make a lot of changes. Unfortunately, Bill C-58, there was not a lot of consultation when it was first tabled. But if you look at the first draft of Bill C-58 and what was actually passed, there was a lot of changes, and those changes were actually very helpful for my office and for the system as well. It was a good start. Good start, okay, but more work to be done. Then we'll go to Mr. Bazan then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you stole a little bit of my thunder there, but because I also want to go down this path with the Commissioner about what type of legislative changes you need to give you the power and the authority to ensure that transparency is being respected, that information is being shared in a timely manner, and that we're not seeing an abuse of authority where government is trying to use top secret classifications or cabinet confidences for things like issues surrounding the purchase of PPE, declaring that it's a national security issue when you're buying things like masks, gloves, and respirators. So I just ask again, as a committee, we want to be looking at doing things proactively. What exact legislative changes do we need to incorporate into the Act to ensure that you have the power to do everything to compel a department to report, to making sure that fines are levied, or whether or not it's put into the hands of the right authorities to whether or not there needs to be charges laid?
I would invite you to read the submission that I submitted to recommendations that I submitted to Monsieur Duclos back in 2020 with respect to the legislative review and also the system as a whole. I have very specific recommendations in there, but the main
Just for the purpose of this committee today, can you just highlight again what are the top level changes that have to happen, and why hasn't Treasury Board and the government acted upon those recommendations?
Yeah, they were supposed to issue their report early this year, but apparently it's been delayed till December. But very specifically, I think there's things in the act that needs to be changed. Like the timeline's 30 days timeline is fine, but the timeline doesn't take into consideration the consultation that happens between institutions. There must be limits on the number of consultation or the amount of time those consultations are taken, because right now the extensions that are being taken by institutions are often because of those consultations, which are not mandatory, by the way. The institution does not have to consult, but often they feel that they have to. We need to have access to those cabinet confidence in my office so that somebody, as I said earlier, who's independent to the government can review them and make our Canadians confident that the documents are actual cabinet confidence. I've asked last year, well, not the ordered power that I have is really, really helpful. But if an institution does not respond to the order, it hasn't happened yet, but I don't have any mechanism to make sure that my order is being respected. So I would like to have a certification process so I can go to the federal court and get the order certified, so that that would have another impact, on the institutions if they refuse to do anything about the order or respond to the orders. There's also all the exemptions and exclusions need to be reviewed with the mind of reducing their impact, reducing and making them more strict, so that we are really limiting the reduction to the minimum. And we need to expand the act to subcontractors, to third parties that are providing public service for the federal government, which right now are not subjected to the act. So I think that Canadians would really appreciate that.
Thank you. Just to talk about the issue of cabinet confidences, is that something that's happening on an increasing level, along with the use of secret and top secret to, I guess, wiggle their way, government can wiggle their way out of providing or meeting a request for access to information?
As I said earlier, it's really difficult for me to say because we do not have access to cabinet confidence, and requesters will often agree not to request those, or they will let it go because they know that nobody can tell them if the documents that has been redacted as cabinet confidence are actual cabinet confidence. We can't look at them. So we haven't seen an increase or a decrease because we don't see them.
When I was over on the National Defense File, we saw a practice there where department officials were using code words and code names to get around access to information requests. Have you witnessed that in other departments?
I don't believe that I have. I've seen acronyms being used, but
famous for acronyms. Every time you start a new portfolio, you got to learn all the acronyms first.
Mr. Bazan, and with that, we go to Ms. Khalid for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for keeping up with our questions and for providing such great answers. I appreciate that. So online summaries of completed access to information requests are removed after 2 years. Do you think it would be helpful for the government to keep them online longer, or what is the justification for those 2 years?
I would have to ask you to check with the Treasury Board, because this is a part of the Treasury Board policy in respect to what an institution must do when they respond to access requests. I do have some complainants that are telling me that some of these requests that they've made are not even published on the website of the institution. It's something that we may look into, but it's not, I don't have I know people are complaining about it, but it's not something that I must say, like, it hasn't come to us as a specific complaints per se. I think it would be helpful for people to have access to those longer. Maybe, that's something maybe your community can look into. It's what would be a good timeline for these access. After a while, some of the information is maybe not relevant anymore, but is 2 years too short?
Thanks for that. That's actually really helpful. Thank you. So I know that members have been, and obviously this whole meeting is about the spending for your office. So prior to our government taking over in 2015, you had spending authorities for 9.9 million, out of which you spent 9.3 million. And this year, or last year, 2021, 2022, you had spending authorities of 14.9 million, which is a significant increase, in which you spent 14.5 million. This year you have 16.3 million for spending authorities. Significant increases, and we're seeing that the number of staff are increasing as well. Do you think that that these increases are helpful to how we're building that public trust within government, which is a significant role that your office fulfills?
Totally. Like we definitely needed more people, resources with respect to the new authorities with Bill C-58. So some of the money that you see in the increase comes from that. And then we requested through submission to Treasury Board during 4 years in a row additional funding, which was given to us on a temporary basis for 3 years, but finally I got it on a permanent basis 2 years ago. So that's definitely helpful, because with a temporary funding, all you can do is hire people and let them go at the end of the year. There's no retention possibility. Now we have a more permanent base, but as I said earlier, it's already not enough, unfortunately.
I appreciate that. Thank you. As things are getting more and more digitalized, and we're seeing, information is being stored online, how does that impact your office? How does that impact the whole regime of access to information and freedom of information?
Well, when the information is already public, an institution can use this as a reason to not respond to an access request and just refer the requester to that information. So the more publication we have, the more information that's published, definitely that's going to lead to less access requests or more specific access requests, like because people will see some information and may ask for specific based on that. But right now, we see that the information that's provided, it's not what Canadians are asking for, and unfortunately, they can't find the information that they want, so they have to go through the access requests system.
And how does that interplay with privacy laws within our country?
Not sure I understand the.
So when we request, ATIPs or freedom of information, if it's with respect to a certain individual or a certain file, versus what some have classified as cabinet confidence, how does that impact privacy laws of an individual person? That somebody can FOI, somebody else's private information. Is there legislation? Do you find that is a concern of your office?
It's actually, I would tell you, there's an exemption right now under the Access to Information Act where personal information is redacted unless you have the consent or the information is public. So it's the most used exemption probably through access requests that we see, and it's rarely questionable. I think our institutions understand what privacy and protection of information is. We have a few cases that where we don't agree with the institution, but it's really rare, and that we take that very seriously. And we do have a good report with the Privacy Commissioner on those type of cases.
All right, thank you. And now, Monsieur Villemur, pour 2 minutes et
2.5 minutes, Mr. Villemur. Thank you very much. Madam Commissioner, how would you describe confidence? It's the ability to believe that the information is complete and true, and that people can use it to make an opinion or make decisions. Thank you. And if we go higher up, if we talk about the government, I have often defined confidence and trust as not having to prove anything to anyone. But would you say that the public trusts the government? Answer, you'd have to ask Canadians. There was an election recently. I think people are curious and have a lot of questions. I have 3 young boys, and they often ask difficult questions. I think that's where we're at with our Canadians as well. Social media also helps people have more questions. Would you make a link between trust in the government and the number of requests, of well-founded requests? Answer, I'm not sure if the link is direct, but I can say that if Canadians are given information, well, they would probably believe the government instead of turning to misinformation that can be found on social media. I think that the government has the responsibility to give information as quickly as possible so that people, and even if they don't agree with the information or with the decisions, at least they understand what was done and what the circumstances were. That explains the second part of your mission, accountability at the federal level. So if there was more disclosure, well, at least we would know that the information disclosed is true, instead of disinformation that is often fueled by social media or other websites. So we'd have at least the facts and be able to have good discussions, correct? Yes. So we'll await your recommendations on the matter. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I see here that according to your office, you are looking at and giving special attention to gender-based analysis plus in your departmental plan. And it is quoted as saying, in terms of whether the OIC's program contains any barriers to access, the OIC is assessing how best to collect the segregated data on complaints from members of GBA plus groups. So I bring that up because I know that there's a specific issue regarding a black class action lawsuit, and I think you had alluded to the way in which Crown privilege tends to obstruct some of the information that goes and flows. And so I wonder if you're currently investigating on behalf of black public service workers the concealing of critical desegregated data from the period of 1991 to 2018.
I wouldn't be able to tell you specifically if we have a complaint or what are we investigating on. The other limitation that we have is we don't know usually who our requesters or complainants are unless they tell us. So I'm not allowed to ask, are you a person of the Black community, or are you somebody from the First Nation? Sometimes we see from the cases that they're looking into that we get who we're dealing with. But it's really interesting when people are telling us, and we are able to prioritize some of those cases, especially when there's an urgent need for the information. Unfortunately, as you can see, 6,000 cases that we're investigating every year.
If I could, because I only have a minute left, you did,
yes,
I believe, reference in your opening remarks some particular struggles that First Nations were having on getting information, and again, like I would believe that in a fair, good faith nation to nation negotiation process as it relates to land claims, as it relates to other agreements, that there would be an openness by this government. Could you perhaps expand upon the ways in which First Nations are particularly impacted by some of the barriers presented within this process?
They're particularly impacted, and I met with the Director of Claims and Research Center, the Director of National Claims Research this week. And but they are using most of the time the informal process. But if they don't get the information that they want, then they have to go through the formal process to make a complaint to my office. So it's those delays that are added to everything. But I was happy to see that Minister Miller was talking about providing more information and dealing with, reconciliation and those claims that our member of the Indigenous community are doing. So I'm hoping that there's some light over to the tunnel at the end of the tunnel in this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
With that, I'll go to Mr. Carrick.
Thank you very much, and appreciate your candor with us here today, Commissioner. One of the challenges that I've noted over the course of the last 2.5 years or so is a huge shortage in ATIP officers. That there are just not enough staff within departments to fulfill ATIPs. Is that something that's consistent with your experience and understanding across the whole of government?
Totally. I've had some institutions telling us that they actually have the financial means to hire more people. They just can't find people to work in that field. It's a very difficult job because you are always between a person who wants the information yesterday and the institution that doesn't want to give it or is taking time to gather the information, and then you're fighting back and forth. So it's not an easy position. And it's also very difficult to get training. So I heard that TBS is now doing a project where they're going to be hiring a pool of candidates so that they can share with the institutions and provide hopefully training for these individuals. And I'm hoping that's going to work and ultimately will help institutions.
And you've referenced the use of technology, using things like artificial intelligence and that sort of thing. Are there comparable jurisdictions around the world that we can point to and say, they're doing it well and possibly emulate either legislation, policy, practice, that sort of thing?
I'm not aware of any specific country that would have a better technology. I'm sure there are. It's really difficult to compare sometimes with some other countries, but we know that we have departments like Pêche and Ocean, Department of Fishery and Ocean. They've put in place some systems that really helps them respond to access requests in a timely manner. CSIS is actually pretty good. I know they're not providing a lot of information, but finding the information for them is not a question. So there's good practices here in Canada.
So we just need to make sure those good practices are forwarded across government. So the type of media. I know over the course of some of the ATIPs that I've done, there's gaps in part because there will have been a presentation that was done where information is referenced maybe in an email or a letter, but that information is not available in ATIPs. Phone calls that are made, an email that says, give me a call and we can discuss further. How do we ensure that there is that openness and transparency when, whether intentional or not, there are ways to circumvent the system?
Well, right now, Canada, our federal government, does not have a duty to document, legislated duty to document. So our institutions are left to document what they want, and they are encouraged to always take minutes or notes and make sure that the big decisions, policy decisions, are being saved somewhere. But there's no consistencies. And now with working from home, it's even worse. I can tell you we've had our first case where somebody asked for a video taping of a team meeting because that's new to our government. And the team meeting was not recorded and nobody took times to even take minutes during that meeting. So, this is new and people have to find ways. You don't have to record, but you have to have somebody still take minutes at meetings. You still have to make sure that it's filed properly so that when there's an access request, you can find it. So a duty to document in a legislation would definitely help that.
No, I appreciate that, and the acknowledgement that there is the fact that those gaps do exist, and because there's currently very little documentation, it's I would suggest impossible to know as to how much information is lacking because of that gap that currently exists. In terms of COVID and the working from home home side of things, and the huge increase in access to information requests. In your letter to Minister Duclos, you talk about how there's a lack of understanding of the Act and the duties associated with that. Is an effort needed across government to make sure that that understanding is brought to a level consistent across all of government?
Mr. Kirk, you really did start a lengthy question with only a few seconds left, so I will allow the witness to give, if she'd care, to give a very brief answer, or perhaps let that come out in additional testimony.
I understand that Minister Duclos and his office has informed the institutions that they cannot stop working with, they have a legislative obligation to respond to access requests, and we've done the same thing, but we've seen that some units have completely shut down during COVID, and that was unacceptable.
Thank you, and now Ms. Sachs for up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you, Madame Menard, for joining us today. It's been a really important discussion. We've moved beyond the estimates, but I think this is the best place to unpack how we best serve you with the budgets that are before us. So I want to take note that since 2015, the government has invested over $50 million in incremental funding to improve Canadians' access to information. But we've talked today about the backlogs and the incremental increases to the budget, some years quite significant. But here we are. So with $50 million in investments, when we're looking at ourselves here in 2022, do we have more transparency than we did, let's say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Or are we still doing this delicate balance because the volume is so high that the investments are keeping us really in the same level of transparency decade after decade?
Well, I think because the number of requests have increased so much, like I said earlier, 225% in 6 years, there is definitely more information out there. There's a lot more requests, there's a lot more interests, but we can definitely do more. And it's not just by putting money in units. We need to provide voluntary disclosure, proactive disclosure. We have to invest in other means because we're never going to have enough resources if we can't, give the information without having to recourse to an access request. My office is never going to be big enough, and institutions are not going to be able to ever be sufficiently resourced to respond to the surge.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, we've also talked about that when individuals make requests, there's a hesitancy, or they almost gate themselves in terms of cabinet confidentiality, of saying, well, I can't ask for this. I know I can't ask for this, so I'm not going to ask for this. So it's going to be a two-part question. One, why is cabinet confidentiality important? And then my second question would be since cabinet confidentiality currently is a fundamental element of the system of government that we have, do you think it's important that candor be protected? So first, one, why is it important, and why is it part of the system we have? And two, what would more openness look like?
I really think I agree that it's important for ministers and cabinets to be able to discuss frankly, openly, policies and legislation and changes to what's going to happen to our to Canada in a protective way. And when I ask for the authority to review those cabinet confidence, it's not to disclose them. And that's the thing that I think most people don't understand, is that it's really to make sure that we are using the exclusion as cabinet confidence appropriately. But right now, there's no way to challenge that. So what I would like is to continue to protect cabinet confidence, but having some review mechanism so that we know that any government is doing it appropriately and not abusing the exemption.
And in the recommendations that you've put forward previously, has been there some discussion of that in kind of setting up parameters of a framework of what could be considered, or we haven't gotten there yet?
No, we're not there yet.
Okay. All right. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair? 1 minute 15. Okay, I'm
Split your
going
time if you like.
to split my time with my colleague, Ms. Hefner.
Okay, you got minute 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move the motion that I gave oral notice of, I believe, a week or so ago. So I'll read it out if that's appropriate. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study that examines the issue of digital surveillance by employers of Canadians who work from home, including the prevalence of digital surveillance by employers, what type of surveillance is being collected, how personal surveillance data is being stored and secured, what rules are in place to protect employees' privacy rights while working from home, and data collection, disclosure, and permission rights of employees, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. And I know that there was discussion at the time that this seemed to some members to be similar to the AI study that we've proposed, but it's actually totally different. It's not just about AI. It's about the fact that more and more people are working from home, and employers seem to be taking greater liberties in what sort of intrusions they can make into people's privacy. So it's about the bigger issue of people working from home and what sort of privacy they are afforded and what sort of privacy they are due, and how do we protect those privacy rights when people are isolated from their other employees and their unions and working on their own at home. And what my colleague Michael Coteau has found is that there's been a significant increase in surveillance by employers over their employees working from home. So it's not just about AI. It's about how do we protect the privacy of people who are working from home. And it's become a big issue because of the pandemic and so many more people working remotely. I think it's important, and I think it's beyond AI. So I'll finish with that. Thanks.
Is there anybody, any other debate? Okay, there being no debate, then all those in favor of the motion? Okay, I see, I do see, I think I saw Mr. Bain's hand. Okay. Recorded vote has been requested. So, Madam Clerk, if you could conduct the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you all heard the text of the motion. The motion from Ms. Hefner, Mr. Baines.
I vote in favor.
Ms. Cabayaga. Ms. Cayabaga, can you hear me? Your boom is up. You're muted. We don't hear you. Can you give us maybe a thumbs up or down? Ms. Cabayaga, if you want, I will actually move to the next other people, and I will revert back to you at the end, okay? Is the committee okay with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. We'll go back to you at the end. Miss Hefner.
In favor.
Ms. Khalid.
In favor.
Ms. Sachs.
In favor.
Mr. Bazan.
Opposed.
Mr. Kirk.
I'm opposed.
Mr. Williams.
Opposed.
Monsieur Villemur.
Je vote contre.
Mr. Green.
Je vote contre.
So we will go back to Ms. Cayabaga. So can the members agree that they saw a thumbs up?
Yes.
There we go. We don't hear you, but we did saw a thumbs up. Thank you very much.
I vote against the motion. There are other, okay. So, Ms. Hefner, I had about, I don't know, probably about 45 seconds left in her speaking round if she wishes to put a question to the commissioner. Otherwise, we will go to the next speaker.
You can go to the next person.
Okay, Mr. Williams, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would just, I'd like to move a motion that I gave notice to a few weeks back, and I'll read it into the record if I can, sir. That pursuant to Standing Order 108-3H, I guess that's 7, the committee to conduct a study into the access to information and privacy system, which routinely violates its own mandate for open government through delays and mismanagement. That the study consists of no fewer than 5 meetings, that the committee report its findings to the House.
Okay, the motion is in order. Debate. I saw Ms. Khalid and Mr. Kirk.
Mr. Kirk can go first.
Mr. Kirk, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move an amendment in acknowledgement of some consultations that we strike the. Do you have the original motion? Yeah. That we strike the from the words, quote, which routinely violates its own mandate for open government through delays and mismanagement, end quote, that be struck from the motion.
The amendment is in order. Debate on the amendment. Okay, seeing none, are there any, all those in favor of the amendment? Okay, seeing no opposition, the amendment carries. Any discussion on the main motion? As amended. Discussion? No, seeing none.
Sorry, Chair. Can you
okay,
just read
go
out
ahead.
what the motion is as amended?
I'll ask the clerk to do so.
We just an amendment, Roy?
In a spirit of collaboration.
We have it all.
Yeah.
So here's a.
Go ahead.
You guys got copies?
Is it translated?
Yep.
Okay,
Say-
both official languages. Perfect.
You'll like this.
Oh, you're still on that. That's done. You're on this one. You got 3 days. You can put it into the rest of the study. While you're with us.
Okay, so sorry, I was asked by, or Ms. Khalid asked that it be as amended read, but you now have it. Is this sufficient clarity for the question then? Pardon me? I'm going to have the clerk read it anyway, so go ahead, Madam Clerk.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the motion as amended would be that pursuant to Standing Order 108-3H7, the committee conduct a study into the access to information and privacy systems, that the study consists of no fewer than 5 meetings, and that the committee report its findings to the House.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in...
You got to give us a few moments. As we're kind of,
I kind of did. That was the few moments.
that was a few seconds, unfortunately.
we
we like
corrected the grammatical error as she read back.
Well,
No, thank you, Chair. Sorry,
go
Chair.
ahead. If you have an intervention, please go ahead now.
I do. I just wanted to perhaps ask through you, Chair, Mr. Williams. I mean, this seems to be a very broad study. What specifically is the objective of this? I know that we haven't really debated this motion much, but I would very quickly like to ask the member that.
Thank you to the chair, and I think we.
There is no.
Yeah.
Okay, go. You can go ahead next. There was nobody else in the order. Sorry, just making sure I'm not.
I think we've seen it today. Mr. Chair. I think the testimony speaks for itself, and I think this study will just further investigate and make sure that we're not only hearing the evidence for fixing or putting recommendations through to Parliament to make the changes needed. I think over 2 years or 80 years, some of the evidence is suggested is far too long. This is a mandate that Canadians want to see, and I think this is a good study just to get some good recommendations to Parliament in order to fix that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion?
Sorry, Chair. I just want to again clarify. I mean, the whole office is a very vast and big one, as we saw through our questioning today, just how many different aspects there are. And, you know, I'm very much in support of doing this study. I'm just wondering if the member wants to narrow the scope of that study at this time, this would be a good time to do it.
It would seem, you may think so, but in fact, the member would not be able to procedurally, because that would require an amendment to his own motion, which, again, if you have a suggestion for how to narrow it, you could put it forth in the way of an amendment. Otherwise, the question is the question, and that's what we'll have to vote on.
You can ask the question, Chair.
All right. Okay, now, is there any other debate then on the motion? Seeing no other requests for further interventions in debate, all those in favor of the motion? I see no opposition. The motion is carried. So we've got a few moments left. If there are any other, if anyone else wishes to put a question to the commissioner, this is your time. Otherwise, go ahead, Mr. Couric.
Sorry, thank you, Commissioner. If I could, do you have any numbers regarding statistics for tenure of ATIP officers across government? And if not, is that something that you'd be able to table with the committee?
Are you asking me? Yep.
Yes. Yes. Sorry, it's kind of been jumping around here, but yes. I'm probably I don't have it out of. I know it's 7 years under the legislation that we our terms are for appointments, and I think most of the commissioners have had a few years extra. But I can come back to you with the actual numbers in each commissioners in the past. Sorry, in the midst of the confusion, I'm more interested in the tenures of ATIP officers within departments, not so much
That's not something I would know. I know there's a big turnaround. Yes. So, but maybe TBS would have some statistics on that.
In going once around, I have another speaker. So go ahead, Ms. Khalid, and I think that will probably be the end of it. We're just about out of time. So go ahead, Ms. Khalid, with the last word.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering if the Commissioner is able to provide us information as to how many members of Parliament over the past 6 years have requested FOIs, and if that's information that they can provide to the committee.
I would not be able to tell you. We don't keep those track. We have just general statistics on whether it's a member of the public or a journalist, or but I can give you those statistics, but they're not specifically members of parliaments. I don't believe so.
I'd appreciate those statistics, Mr. Chair.
All right. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you. Merci.